Hello, everybody. Justin Stivers here. Thank you guys for watching and listening to another episode of the Stivers Show. Today, my guest, Shannon Pawley, the CEO and attorney with the Estate and Asset Protection Law Firm in Decatur, Georgia. Shannon, how's it going?
It's going well. Thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. So my introductions are usually terrible, and I think you can probably do a better job than I can. But I know we were talking a little bit before. You're obviously estate planning attorney, Medicaid planning, all of that. But I'll turn it over to you and just kind of let you talk a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Certainly. Thank you so very much. My name is Shannon Pawley. I am both the managing partner as well as an attorney here at the Estate and Asset Protection Law Firm. I have been practicing law over 22 years. I'm licensed in both the states of Georgia as well as Michigan. And during my 22-year plus years of tenure as an attorney, I've focused in different areas. For example, when I first came out of law school, I worked for a small boutique law firm in Metro Detroit doing tax and estate planning. That's actually where I got inspired to pursue my LLM in tax. From there, I ended up working with a national law firm based out of Boston, where I was their VP of litigation operations. And one of the things I had noticed in the corporate world is the money's nice, but the loss of humanity is shocking. And before you know it, you may not like necessarily who you're seeing in the mirror. And I started to have that after about 13 years. And I decided I wanted to go back to my roots. And at that point, I had the honor of being able to come in contact with my law partner, Victoria Collier. And I moved from Detroit down here to lovely Metro Atlanta, where I am doing and returning back to my roots of estate and asset planning. We do focus on different areas within this skill set. And one of the ones that we're very prominently known for is both VA benefit planning as well as Medicaid planning. Actually, when it comes to Medicaid planning, we look at it in two different focuses. We look at it as, I always use the Aesop fable for an example of the ant and the grasshopper. You're either going to be an ant, meaning that you're going to want to do proactive planning to protect all of your assets today so that they're protected from the grasp of the government in 5+ years from now. Or you're more of the grasshopper, to where you didn't necessarily plan, but you need it now. So let's sit down and figure out how we can qualify you promptly for Medicaid while still protecting a significant portion of your assets. So I would say that is definitely us in a nutshell. Victoria is nationally known for being an expert on VA pension aid and attendance. We're very proud of our military roots, such as Victoria is a veteran, and I'm actually the spouse of a Navy veteran as well as the daughter of a Navy veteran. So the military has always had a very strong place in our heart and our passions. And these are individuals that have served, so we're honored to be able to serve them back.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, 22 years, you're not bored of it yet?
No, actually, I compare, when I talk to people about how I draft documents, for example, or before I'm going into the courtroom for a contested probate or etc., I always look at it as though I love being the creator, meaning drafting a beautiful plan, just like being a sculptor and making David. But from some of my history where I have represented creditors that have pierced these estate plans and etc., I also look at it as Attila the Hun, actually trying to figure out how to grasp whatever I'm trying to shield. So it's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of strategy, and there's a lot of reward that comes to it because you're able to help people maintain their independence as long as possible, provide for their care and comfort for when, unfortunately, their independence is lost due to such things as cognitive inability or Parkinson's or etc.
Yeah, and I know you all, we didn't talk about this before, but I know you all deal with people suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia and that sort of stuff. I mean, is that, you never know when that's going to happen, right? You never know. That's, just unfortunately might creep up on you or whatnot. And the time to plan is well before. I mean, what advice do you give to people, just because we know those types of things can happen? So I'm sure as part of your normal presentation, when you're speaking with prospective clients, that's a part of, what you all talk about, that, hey, this could happen and this is what we need to plan for.
Exactly, because one of the comments that I make, to matter who I'm speaking to, is the importance that they be aware that nobody knows what the future is going to bring. And as such, you need to be prepared today for whatever life brings to you. And yes, there's some people that is very easy to emphasize the importance because they have a genetic predisposition to dementia or Alzheimer's. There's others that may be some of our Navy veterans that, based upon Agent Orange, are starting to show Parkinson's. So some of the times there's telltale history that's going to support in my presentation when I'm expressing the need to, while you have independent thought, how you can preserve your independent wants, wishes, and aspirations today when you don't have a voice tomorrow. But even for those that don't have the predispositions or the pre-exposures, if you're over the age of 18, you should always have 3 very basic documents. You should always have a will. You should always have a financial power of attorney. You should always have a healthcare power of attorney with medical directive. Because far too often, people are falling under a myth that, based upon familiar relationship, it automatically entitles them to information, such as, just because I'm married and I have a spouse, that does not mean that my spouse has an entitlement to know my medical treatment plans and participate in healthcare decisions unless I set them up for it. And that's where I want them to be involved. And while I have independent thought of who I want to be my advocates of assistance, that's definitely when you need to start planning. And one never really knows when one could have a closed head injury or some other unfortunate ailment, especially right now in our COVID environment. I know when we're talking about medical directives, because that's really important when it comes to independence also, that you have control of when you are ready to let go of control. And also, it's the kindest gift that you can give a loved one, because too often you could have a family member that the doctor's coming in and saying, okay, what do I do? They're for all intents and purposes, they're brain dead. There's a less than a 1% chance they're going to make it. Do I pull the plug or not? And imagine the loved one sitting in an emergency room on one shoulder. They're going, oh, that's mom. Mom's a fighter. If there's even a 1% chance, she's going to make it. If I pull that plug, I'm killing her. But then they have the other angel on the shoulder that's going, but wait a second. What if this person is now suffering in silence? And by me keeping them on a machine, I become their tormentor. So these medical directives not only is a expression of your independence, but it's the kindest gift you can give a loved one, because that's a difficult decision no matter which way you make it. But at least they're honoring you and your wishes in making that decision, instead of, unfortunately, forever second guessing whatever their decision was that they would have made.
Since you all work with veterans, I'm curious, do you all, how does someone who's maybe suffering from PTSD or does that something you all see, and how do you kind of plan with that?
Well, actually, we don't do disability claims, but we have a very close relationship with several other law firms, because we're of the belief that we know what we're good at, and we know people that are better at stuff than us in certain areas. So very often we will sit down and we will talk with the veteran or the veteran's family, and we will prepare everything for them of what to be expecting with their next meeting with an expert, and explain why we're handing them off for a disability claim. But definitely, we never want people to feel as though they don't have an option or that they don't have potential relief. And even if we cannot provide that directly from our services, we have very close relationships with other attorneys that can provide that exact assistance. We mainly focus on the VA pension aid and attendance.
Gotcha. Yeah, understood. So going back, to what you were talking about, where it's really about these directives, and it's someone making the decision for when they want to give up those rights, right? Like the thought of not being able to make our own medical decisions, our own it's a scary thought, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's a very scary thing to think about. And so, but planning now, you're actually, kind of planning for a day when you might not be able to it, and you're making your wishes now, what those wishes would be. We're talking a little bit. I know that you and Victoria are kind of finishing a book, Becoming Your Parents' CEO, which I think, if you wouldn't mind maybe talking a little bit about that and the story behind that and what that's going to
Oh,
include.
certainly. So one of the things that is very discouraging to myself and Victoria is when we have a caregiver that is exasperated, needing assistance. And as we start to talk to them, they say the following key word, and that is, I'm becoming my parents' parent. And one of the things we try to do in assisting these caregivers is to shift their mindset. Because if you're becoming your parents' parent, that is almost a negative way to express your current situation. Instead, what we try to change and shift that mindset on is focusing on, well, actually, you're not your parent's parent. That's pretty disrespectful. They will always be your parent. You will always respect and love them in that parental role. But now, as the caregiver or the fiduciary, you're actually more like a CEO of a corporation. What I mean by that is you are acting in the best interest of your stockholders, who in this case would be your parents, and everything you are doing is to support and promote their best interests within the capabilities that you have at that moment, whether that be financial opportunities, whether it be medical remedies, or maybe it might even be governmental benefit programs that they may be able to qualify for. But the whole focus here is the shift of that mindset, because by focusing yourself as being more of the CEO, you're distancing that, I will call it the emotional anchor, and you're actually realizing you're there to promote and build up the situation as strongly as possible, because the life of a caregiver is not an easy one. It's a very difficult life. And it's a labor of love that at times it becomes very exasperating. And we want to provide not only guidance and assistance, but also mind shifting to make it to where that role that they're filling that is so valuable for their loved one is actually being addressed in that positive, proactive assistance instead of focusing on the lost relationship.
Do you see, because I imagine it's difficult for parents and child to come in and have this discussion, and especially if it's later, I guess it's difficult at all times, but how do you do you see one or the other, where you see parents coming in, they come in with their children? Is it a joint effort, or do you have to come back and say, listen, I think we need to get the whole family involved? What's kind of your process for that?
Well, one of the first comments I will make in my personal experience is that when it comes to having talks about one's mortality, in my experience, my female clients are more open to this conversation. Um, Very often, if I do have a male in the room, it's usually because the wife's the one that set up the appointment and he is there at the request of the wife. However, when starting to talk about one's mortality, especially when you are the caregiver protector of the family, you're expressing your vulnerabilities through your mortality. And it's a really difficult conversation. So, number one is just to make sure that people are in the right mindset for this type of a conversation, because it is a very heavy conversation. But death should not be a taboo topic. And we want people to be open in having these conversations. Now, very often when we start making these plans, they will start to disclose who they want their fiduciaries to be. And we will very often mention that you might want to have that child or all of your children hear in your own words that it's your wishes that the middle child be your primary agent, and why. And that is not that he or she loves one more than the other.
Or maybe they do.
Or maybe they do. You never know. But I know that's one of the biggest concerns when I'm talking to people who are trying to declare out through their current independence, focusing on who's going to be their fiduciaries, is a lot of guilt in assigning that responsibility to someone. Not so much of it being the cross to bear, but almost as though it is showing favoritism. And that is a very significant mental block parents quite often have. So by trying to be the mediator in this conversation with the children being part of the conversation, it actually opens up so many more beautiful conversations, both within my office and subsequently thereafter. But most definitely, it is a certain mindset or a certain situational exposure that you have when talking about these end of life decisions, one's own mortality, and how to handle situations both during one's incapacity as well as one's passing. That is a very heavy conversation.
Yeah, and speaking to the certainty of our mortality, obviously with COVID, I'm curious what you've seen. My kind of observation has been that I think in the very beginning, when all of this happened, started happening several months ago, people were like, "Oh wait, this is very real." And even though now it might be even more real than it was before, people maybe are kind of like, "Oh, this is just the new norm." Are you sensing that people are, seeing that, "Oh wait, we could literally get a virus, and we got to have all our stuff together now," or is it just business as usual?
No, I will say that definitely when we're dealing with medical directives have become a very hot and key topic, not only with our referral agents and people have referral relationships with, but also when we're talking to either new or current clients. Never before had they ever truly had the thought of what it meant to be on a ventilator. Very often, people would equate having an oxygen mask as being on a ventilator, which is so much more invasive. It's kind of the same idea with CPR. On the movies, it looks all push, 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 and they're awake. When honestly, there's so many broken bones and other injuries and etc. So, number one that I would say is people have become more aware and more precise on how they want their end of life decisions to be, especially when it comes to that medical directive, so that, yes, they may want to be able to die naturally free of pain, but one of the comments I hear quite often as of late in our current COVID environment is they never want to be gasping for air as their last moments on this earth. So that was one big change. But of course, when we start talking about that, that means that people have already come to terms and have thought out their own mortality. So now that we talk about, I'll call it the final chapter, let's talk about the pages leading up to that final chapter, which is where we start talking about the planning to be able to still provide not only for oneself during life, but also for their legacy after their passing. So we take that very stressful topic and we try, and actually we turn it to where they get control back over their life and the situation. You're being able to make decisions through their estate planning.
Well, I know we're kind of coming up on our time here, and I always like to leave listeners with some useful advice or something they can take away, which we've already done that. But one final point, a lot of people maybe listening and or watching tend to not be yet thinking about Medicaid planning or anything like that. Maybe tend to skew a little bit younger. So what should they be thinking about? What should someone, let's just say in their mid 40s, late 50s, somewhere around there, what should they be thinking about as far as, I guess, what you all would maybe call estate and asset protection planning?
So one of the first things I'd be emphasizing to, I will call individuals that are still within their wage earning years, under 65, is you always, always, always need to have powers of attorney. You need to have those financial powers of attorney. You need to have the healthcare powers of attorney, because you never know what life is going to bring. And you always never want your family shut out, because officially, for healthcare reasons, for example, under HIPAA, hospitals aren't supposed to acknowledge they have a patient by your name, much less let your family members know what's going on. And the last thing you would ever want is to shut them out. So you definitely want to have that prepared. If you have minor children, you need to have a plan on how to handle, not only if you were to pass, but also here in the state of Georgia, we have what's called power of attorney over a minor, where you're addressing what happens if, God forbid, both parents had to go into the hospital due to COVID and they're both on trachs. Who's going to take care of the kid? Well, yeah, grandma's going to come up, but grandma has no right to take the kid to the doctor and to instruct on treatment plans. That's another thing you want to be thinking about. And all of this is just emphasizing that when one thinks of estate planning, it's not always the final chapter. Very often, it's trying to ensure that your wishes are known and that your independent thoughts and goals are known and preserved and promoted through your estate planning. And only by doing those actions are you truly going to be prepared. Estate planning is not for the rich. Estate planning is not for the old. Estate planning is for everyone. It just happens that everyone has a different story and they're not all going to have the same chapters.
That might be a good tagline for you. Estate planning is for everyone.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome, Shannon. I appreciate it. If people want to learn more about you all, find out when this book comes out, how to get a copy and all that, how's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
That would be by accessing our website at www.elderlawgeorgia, Georgia spelled completely out.com. And on there, feel free to join our mail list. And as we start to promote the publication of our book in the next month or so, announcements will be going out through that methodology, as well as announcements in our blogs and et cetera on our website. Thank you so very much for asking that question.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.